Welcome back, people, to another Gooner Souls video. It's been a few months since I've uploaded or even streamed on that matter, but I have been on people's channels talking all things football and the World Cup. But the Premier League is officially back, people. It is back on Boxing Day, and have we got a hell of a fixture against West Ham United? We'll be talking about the transfer rumours, the Jesus injury, Mudryk, and obviously the biggest talking point, Arteta will be amongst the greats in management to ever grace Football Manager. So let's get right into all of it. What a time to be an Arsenal fan when we're pretty much dominating the world of football at the moment. Rivals are scared. The transfers are looking good. The ownership's looking good. Everything's rosy in the world of Gunners right now. And everyone that you speak to is quite positive, being top of the league, going into the World Cup. Who would have thought this coming into the season? Buying Manchester City rejects as what they told us, and Arteta turning around the fortunes of this club once again, bringing us into the conversations of winning league titles where we meant to be. This is exactly where we need to be, and that is what he's doing. Now, of course, there's been a lot of transfer talks, and one of the predominant ones is that Stan Kroenke or Josh Kroenke, the KSC, have given authorization to Arsenal to spend big this January. And when we say spending big, it doesn't mean big, but it means that we have got funds allocated to really go for this league title. And we're being given an authorization rumored to be around 60 to 80 million pounds to be spent in January. Now, the targets have already come out. A lot of rumors and links and advanced talks have been promoted by the likes of David Ornstein, and even the likes of Fabrizio Romano have come out and particularly mentioning one name, and that is Mudryk from Shakhtar Donetsk, the Ukrainian national, who has been the talk of the town, one of the most brightest young prospects in world football right now. And he's going to cost a pretty penny for a person who has had a season and a half, maybe give or take, of actual top level football to really sort of scout and understand. And it's a big risk when you're talking £60 million for a player who's not really proven in the eyes of the world anyway. And how good is that league? How can he make that transition and make it flawlessly? And now, of course, there's players who adapt better than others. When you look at profiles, when you look at certain attributes, they can transfer a lot better than others. So the question's always going to be whether he's good enough for Arsenal to push on. But we do need depth and we do need quality in that depth as well. When the little that I've seen, now Mudryk isn't a player I'm too familiar with, but he has been heavily pushing it. And this is the thing with transfers. Sometimes they can be good when the player really wants that move as well, because it can be a very good fit for that player. So when we really look at it, the fact that he's adamant and he's pushing and he's trying to get this move, it's his dream move in football, is what we kind of need in personality sense and a mental sense. But when we look at his profile now, again, I do premise this is only highlights and fractions of the games that people have uploaded of his. And he looks really good. He looks tidy on the ball, tight and very good in tight spaces, a very keen eye on goal as well. But he's a more natural winger to Martinelli, and he kind of gives me ESR vibes when he plays off the left with a little bit of a sprinkle of magic, in my opinion, in terms of his dribbling's a lot cleaner than the likes of ESR, who's more pace power. So it's going to be an interesting one. I do think, when we look at the price, I'm not too put off by it. I'm interested in the signing. This signing can go either way. It can be one of the biggest flops and we get another Nicola Pepe, or this could be a superstar in the making. So it's going to be interesting. I don't know what you guys think of this signing, but it's going to be an interesting one, in my opinion. When you then look at the likes of, you know, Alex McAllister, who's had a absolute belter of a World Cup, who's really made a name for himself. But even at Brighton as well, a lot of people were looking at him at Brighton and saying, you know what, there's something there. And I think he made and stapled his name when he made the move. Sorry, when he won the World Cup with Argentina, coming into that team, being the key creative outlet other than Lionel Messi. So it's going to be an interesting one where he ends up, or whether he ends up coming to Arsenal, because we do have a decent relationship with Brighton. We've done business with them in the past, with the likes of Benjamin White coming in. And it seems like, obviously their backroom staff and everything has changed. So there's a lot of things happening at Brighton which could persuade the likes of McAllisters to come to Arsenal, even Moise Caicedo. You don't know where Brighton are heading at the moment. They're in an era of uncertainty, so it could be a time to kind of pry them away from Brighton and make a move to Arsenal, who look a lot more stable, who have the stability behind them with the ownership, with the likes of Arteta being there for 3 years now, celebrating that anniversary. In the interview with obviously Jamie Carragher coming out on the anniversary date. Now, the other names that are being touted in that midfield role, again, Yuri Tillemans is coming up once again. And due to the reason his contract with Leicester is coming to an end, and that's the reason why we're going to be heavily linked to him, because it is Leicester's last hurrah to try and get something from him or to sign him onto a new deal. Now, it does seem like Yuri Tillemans' head's being turned by Europe, and the prospect that he could be a free signing is really sort of enticing Europe to kind of go in for him. So it's going to be interesting if Leicester let him go on a cut free. A lot of people saying it could even be as low as 10 million to 15 million pounds to get Yuri Tillemans in January. So that's going to be an interesting one, because he does look. I'm a bit 50-50 on Tillemans. I prefer other players coming in, but at the price of 10 to 15 million, you're probably not going to get much better than that. So it is somewhat of a no-brainer to try and go in for him. When you then talk about other transfer targets, there aren't many being touted in January. Now, Arteta's been heavily sort of talking about a lot of that we are going to go hard in January because the process needs to continue. The squad needs to depthen. And regardless of the Jesus injury, which is the more sort of telling thing for me, is when they said, regardless of Gabriel Jesus being injured or not, we needed to bring players in. So it kind of shows that they are thinking ahead. They are trying to get the right players. But that's the key, is if the right players become available, there's money on the table to go get them. Are we hearing a Dusan Vlahovic 2.0 where we were in for him the entire transfer window, but nothing came of it? And then after the window closed, we found out he didn't even take our calls or anything. So it's going to be interesting to see whether we're pursuing a target that may not be obtainable, because when you hear, the back and forth between Shakhtar and Arsenal, and the reports seem to be conflicting, which they always are when negotiations are happening. Shakhtar manager and president are coming out and saying no one's met the evaluation that they've set. Obviously, recently the manager saying that clubs around Europe are taking advantage of the situation that's happening in Ukraine and Russia to try and get a cut price on Mudryk as well. And there's a lot of back and forth in these negotiations to try and get, the most out of their star asset. Now, it's interesting because for me, Mudryk does kind of up the needle and up the ceiling of Arsenal and can really put us into the contention of becoming title challengers or even winning the league title. And the reason I say that is because it allows Martinelli to fulfill the role I've always said he should be in, which is down the middle as the main striker. And Mudryk coming in would allow that option to be viable, because with ESR being injured and now Reece Nelson being injured, Martinelli is going to have to deputise and continue playing as a left winger at least the foreseeable future, because we only have striker in Eddie Nketiah, with Gabriel Jesus being out. We're very, very thin on attacking players who can come in and do a job. So Martinelli will not be moved into the middle unless we can buy someone who can play on the wings. And that's only going to happen if we can bring in someone like a Mudryk. So there is going to be that sort of area of uncertainty to see what's happening with this attack, because we're an injury away from an attacking crisis here. So it's really important that we go and strengthen in that position come the January window. as much as people are talking about a CDM, I think with Mohamed El Neni's injury and his recovery and coming back into the team, it's not a pressing issue for me. Now it's become the attack with the likes of Gabriel Jesus being out till February. Obviously, now people are saying early Feb is when he's going to return. Reece Nelson having a similar timeline to 3 to 4 months being out. We're really thin because we've got the likes of bukayo Saka, Nketiah, Martinelli, Fabio Vieira, who could do a job in one of those winging positions. And obviously, depending on when ESR comes back, that's another option. But we're very thin because they're going to be very hit and miss players due to coming back from injury, returning from injuries. And we'll have to see how that kind of goes. But the second topic I really wanted to talk about is Nketiah going to cost us the league? And we've given him a huge contract and a huge sort of boost of confidence when we gave him a contract of £100,000 a week. It's significant money. It's a huge amount for a second fiddle player. Now, a lot of people are going to bring up examples like Julian Alvarez. People are going to bring up Robert Firmino. People are going to bring up Chelsea with the likes of, Broha, Kai Havertz or Aubameyang, or whatever option you want to kind of put as a second fiddle in those teams. Richarlison going for 60 million and being a second fiddle to Harry Kane. You know, and it all makes sense. I get it. People are going to say, but the top teams are paying their players good wages, even though they're second players. Now, the problem that I have is when you put a wage of £100,000 in front of a player, because he's a youth prospect and not a transfer player, it's a bit difficult to kind of judge the importance or judge him on transfer hype because he was a youth prospect for us and not a player that we signed. So when you give that player £100,000 contract rather than letting them go for free, it's a boost of confidence for that player to step up when it really needs to be done. And at the moment, with Gabriel Jesus being out, this is his time to step up. This is Nketiah's time to prove to people like myself and other doubters that he's worth every penny and he's worth being the future of the project and he's worth being around, even if it's in a squad capacity at Arsenal Football Club. Now, I do feel the criticism is valid because we've not seen enough from him, despite obviously how he ended the season, which he always does, by the way. You'll always have a good stint, you'll always have a good run in periods of games, but he's never been consistent enough, in my opinion, to be the guy at Arsenal Football Club, to be the striker at the club. So big pressures on him, big boots to fill, and it's going to be a very interesting few months until the likes of Gabriel Jesus come in, or if we sign someone in the attacking roles that can do a job for us. And kind of the topic a lot of people have been asking on Twitter and my opinions on this, and I kind of wanted to wrap up the show with this, is why I believe Arteta and Arsenal Football Club are well and truly back, and why I believe that they're a force to be reckoned with in years to come. Now, I want to start off by kind of giving the 3 year summary of what Mikel Arteta and the club in the past few seasons have done to kind of give me this confident boost and why I believe this. Now, when we look at it, even if you look at the time of Arsene Wenger, and kind of what he's done, you kind of start to understand why these sort of claims are being made by people like myself and many others. Um, when we look at Wenger, he was a guy who came in and was a revolutionary in football. He brought in a lot of different things, and that's the reason why even when you look at Mikel, he's doing a lot of the same things, and it's a huge sort of statement to make. And the reason why I say it is because when Wenger came in, he sort of brought in the whole dietitians. He brought in people who kind of look at a person's diet and health and personal trainers, etc., to kind of fine tune a lot of footballing areas. So when you sort of look at what Wenger did to change the Premier League, and obviously being the first manager, I think with 11 foreign players to win the league, which was never done before. People thought when you have foreign players, foreign teams, they aren't going to do it in the Premier League, and he was one of the first managers to do that. Now, when you fast forward, obviously, when we made the move to the Emirates, nothing since has been right for Arsenal. We haven't competed for the league. We haven't really competed and done anything significant for the Arsenal name. So when we sort of start looking at those facets and we start looking at it from that perspective, you start to truly understand why I believe Arteta is going to change the fortunes of Arsenal. And the reason is he's come in and he's doing a lot of things to modernize the game at Arsenal. Look at the rebranding and the sort of infrastructure that we're doing, and the infrastructure changes from the stadium to bring the fans more closer to the club, from the likes of all and nothing, the sort of fan cams and the bench cams that we're now doing as well. He's bringing that sort of unity and connection from the club to the fans, and that's one of the key things to bringing Arsenal back. And we are a fan oriented club. We are a club that really sort of prioritizes how the fans feel. So when these things are happening, you can start to see the signs of us coming back with the likes of, I've forgotten what they're called, but they kind of do all the atmosphere and the flag stuff at also I've forgotten what their name is. It's eluded me at the minute, but it will come back to me soon. And when you look at the deals that we're doing, like the Prime deal is a perfect global marketing tool to bring the commercial value of the club up as well. Then when you look at the likes of our scouting networks changed as well, we're a lot more data driven, we're a lot more sort of mental driven, from the points of we're looking at players' reactions to losses, to injuries, to things not going their way. So when these things are happening, you've really got to pay attention to the finer details. Look at all or nothing. That kind of broke down absolutely everything and confirmed everything that we've been reading about, we've been investigating, and we've been researching about in terms of what Arteta's doing for Arsenal Football Club. And that's a big key. Look at the scouting network behind him now. We're data driven, we're profile driven, we're mental driven. Even when you look at Ben White's reaction to him being signed for Arsenal and some of the reports and what he said to people close to him, when he spoke to the likes of Eddie, when he spoke to the likes of Mikel Arteta before signing for Arsenal, was they were impressed by the level of detail they went into in terms of knowing what foot he was, knowing his weak foot, knowing his strengths and weaknesses, his mental capacity as well in terms of how he reacts to certain situations, like what he likes to be managed and how he likes to be managed. To that level of detail that Arsenal had a compiled report for and said these are the things we need to work on and these are the things that we're going to do for you, etc. And this is the project at hand and this is how you fit into it. This is our plans for you and why we want to sign you. And obviously, buying someone like that for £50 million kind of shows that we have a lot of faith in the sort of proposition that we're now buying. Um, Even when you look at the situation with Aubameyang and how we handled that in terms of being one of the most prized assets at Arsenal Football Club and being a fan favourite, everyone was riding for Aubameyang. As much as people did say his time's maybe up at the club, this coming out and the way that Arteta handled it in such professionalism to the point where even the players responded positively because we went on a good run of form when he left the club, and also kind of shows you that the club handled it in the perfect way that they could because the player was the one looking bad with the way he did the transfer, being at Barcelona without Barcelona or Arsenal authorizing any of this. So when you kind of start to really break down the finer tune things, you realize why he's going to become one of the greats, because even the mad things he does in game and his in-game management, not everything's been perfect. Just like Pep Guardiola, not everything's correct. Sometimes they do overthink, and they are sort of, because they're so geniuses of the game of football, they sometimes don't realize how much they've overthought it as well. They're not perfect, but they are savants of the game. And when you sort of look at the Wolves game, how he came back in that when we were down 1-0, bringing the likes of Eddie Nketiah on, the likes of Nicola Pepe on, and that transformed the game and we won 2-1. They're the kind of moments where you look at it and go, yeah, he truly does understand the strengths and weaknesses of this team. Even when you look at, the Jamie Carragher interview he done for the Monday Night Football special, you start to realize a few things in there, what he says. When Jamie Carragher said, when you first came into Arsenal, you had a pragmatic mindset. What changed? And he said, I looked at the set of players that I had and I needed to understand the best way to utilize them. And Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang is a counter-attacking footballer, and that's the way I needed to play to get the best out of him. But then I soon realized this is not the way I want to play, and I need to implement the style that I want to play. So he needed to then accelerate, and then he got his opportunity when these disciplinary actions were taken against him, and the club got rid. And that's when they started to realize the kind of player they wanted in the likes of a mold of a Gabriel Jesus, the hybrid of a Nketiah, Lacazette, Aubameyang type player. And that's exactly what they went and got. We like to play with sort of inverted fullbacks, and the best one at the moment is Zinchenko at doing that specialized role. We went and got him, against a lot of odds. I mean, the only other player we wanted to bring into that mold was a Lisandro Martinez. So it kind of shows we've got a set profile. We're not bothered by the name, but they have to be able to do that role. So when we sort of puzzle all these things together, when he's able to sort of adapt his game, even when you look at it from a defensive point of view. And I think his sort of footballing journey is the perfect epitome and the perfect sort of story to tell how he manages games. Because when you look at David Moyes, he's a very well structured, very good defensively organized manager. And you can see that in his tactics, and you can see that in the way he sets up in certain games. But you also can see the influences of the likes of Johan Cruyff and Pep Guardiola and the Barcelona La Masia mindset as well. When you look at the dictation and the tempo control and the pressing that's being implemented by Arteta. And he said it, Johan Cruyff was a big influencer on the way he sort of sees football and the way he sort of wants to play the game. And he said he modifies it because you can't have a copy and paste model. You need to make it your own identity. We've got Sakito John in the chat. Thank you very much for coming in. We need to go big in January transfer. It may help the players to have that elite mentality 100%, because what it does, it gives them a boost of confidence, and it gives them the ability to see that, okay, the club are being serious. And I mean, with the way that Mikel Arteta is speaking about transfers and the window in general, he needs the club to now back his talk up, because for me, he's one of the best at handling the press in terms of the relationship between the owners and the football club and making sure that no one gets to blame. Wenger kind of went around it the wrong way, in my opinion, in terms of he was the shield to the owners but never held them accountable for anything they were doing. Whereas Mikel Arteta is protecting the owners, but he's making sure that the owners also back what he wants to do and give them the money. Now, if reports are to be true, he's sort of held them to accountable, and they've authorized, a transfer budget to be set for January, which is a large window. From what we're hearing, at least 2 to 3 players can come in, depending on outgoings and everything like that as well. So you're 100% right to keep the mentality going and to kind of give those players an idea that, look, we're not here to mess around and we're here to be serious. Is the biggest message they can do is buy those players, buy the Mudryks, because we know until we don't secure Champions League football or even do the miracle and go win the league this season, we're not going to get that top name, your Erling Haalands to come, the likes of, Enzo Fernandez, your Jude Bellinghams, those sort of Declan Rice type players who are touted to the best of Europe at the moment. You're not going to be able to pry them away from a move to a Man City or a Chelsea at the moment. Maybe over Chelsea at the moment, but the likes of Liverpool even, are going to have a little bit more pulling power than ourselves, because of we've not shown our project yet. We've not shown the progression levels yet to demand the top talents in Europe. Now, there's obviously going to be exceptions to that rule, but we can now start to kind of solidify, and it's not all going to be, well, I'm telling you this is going to happen. It's proofs in the pudding. Even coming second and mounting a huge challenge against Man City is a huge testament to how far we fell and how far we've now come. So you're 100% right. I think, a lot of things are going to send the mentality, and us being proactive and knowing the targets we want and try and secure them early in January is going to send a good vibe even in the summer window. Forget about the fans, but to potential signings who want to come in. because they're going to realize that Arsenal are serious. They really do want to progress, and they truly do want to, take that next level in their phase. And this is how we're going to do it. They're not going to come into that uncertainty. Are they going to, back the club? Are they going to invest in the club? Is this the place I'm actually going to win? Or was it a one-time fluke? Or was it, this is it. The ambitions are going to fiddle away. And this is why I'm saying it's important for us to really stamp our authority in the January window and make sure that we kind of go out and do everything we can. Signing a Mudryk alone is, for me, a good step in the right direction, because you're not always going to get your transfer targets in a January window. And I think that's where I want to kind of put the expectations and taper the expectations of some Arsenal fans, because some of them do realize that and some do understand it, but a lot of people don't seem to understand that idea as well. But we are going to leave it there. It's been a good return. Do hit the subscribe button. Do comment below. Like the video if you can. Share if you can. Thank you very much, people. Have a good evening. Have a good holiday. Take care. And I'll see you on